Rain poured relentlessly over the city that night, streaking down the tinted windows of a sleek black Bentley that crawled through the narrow streets like a shadow from another world. The wipers swung back and forth with rhythmic precision, but they couldn't quite keep up with the storm. Inside the car sat a man whose face was calm, too calm for someone returning to a place he had vowed never to see again. Ethan Cole. The name once adorned the business pages and financial columns across the nation. A man who built an empire from nothing, who turned every stone he touched into gold. But tonight, under the ghostly flicker of streetlights, that same man was just another silhouette burdened by memories money could never bury. His driver slowed as the car approached a modest house at the end of Maplewood Lane, a sharp contrast to the glass and marble mansion Ethan called home. The place looked smaller now, its paint a little dull, the porch light trembling in the rain. Yet to Ethan, it looked painfully familiar. Every corner, every creak of that wooden gate whispered the same word: home. "Are you sure about this, sir?" the driver asked gently, glancing through the rearview mirror. Ethan nodded once, eyes never leaving the gate. "You can wait here. I won't be long." The umbrella snapped open with a soft pop as he stepped out. The rain clung to his coat immediately, soaking into the dark wool, but he didn't care. Each step toward that front door felt heavier than the last. He had faced hostile takeovers, ruthless negotiations, even betrayal, but nothing compared to this. 5 years. 5 long years since he'd last seen her. Her name slipped through his thoughts like a ghost. Clara. They'd once dreamed together in this house, laughing over takeout boxes and dancing barefoot to old jazz records. But dreams fade when pride takes root. Ethan's obsession with success had slowly replaced the man she loved with someone colder, harder, until the warmth in her eyes was gone. The divorce had been quick, brutal, and final. Or so he'd believed. He reached the door, hesitated, and knocked. For a moment, only rain answered him. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, cautious. The door cracked open just enough for a pair of tired eyes to appear. Clara. She hadn't changed much, yet everything about her was different. Her hair was tied back messily, her face pale under the soft yellow glow of the hallway light. There was surprise in her eyes, but also something else. A guarded stillness. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. "Hi Clara," he managed. His throat tightened around the words. I know it's late. I just needed to see you." She blinked, as though unsure whether to slam the door or let him in. "You can't just show up after 5 years." She whispered. "What do you want?" He looked at her, the storm reflected in his eyes. "Just a few minutes. Please." She hesitated before opening the door wider. The warmth from inside brushed his face, carrying with it the faint scent of cinnamon and lavender, the same way it always had. He stepped in quietly, careful not to drip too much rain onto the rug. The house was smaller than he remembered, yet every detail struck him with aching familiarity. The picture frames on the mantel, the soft ticking of the clock, the worn couch they'd once argued and made up on. "Still the same couch," he murmured. She folded her arms. "Can't afford a new one," she said plainly. "Some of us don't have millions lying around." He flinched. "He deserved that, Clara." He began softly. "I didn't come here to talk about money. I came because I heard about your mother." A flicker of emotion broke through her composure. "You heard. I ran into an old friend from the neighborhood. They told me she passed away last month." She looked down, her lips trembling slightly before she drew in a breath. "She did. Peacefully, at least. You didn't have to come all the way here for that." "I wanted to," he said. "Your mother was kind to me, even when she shouldn't have been. I wanted to pay my respects." Clara studied him for a long moment. "You paid your respects when you left, Ethan. We made peace with that." The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the rain filled it, tapping against the windows like faint reminders of time lost. Ethan's gaze fell on a small picture frame near the fireplace. A younger Clara smiling, holding a child, his breath caught. He stepped closer. "That's your son." Her eyes hardened. "My son, yes." He turned to her slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "Clara, whose child is he?" Her answer came like a blade. "Mine. That's all you need to know." Ethan swallowed hard, something twisting deep in his chest. There was a flicker of resemblance, a familiar curve in the boy's smile that made his pulse race. He wanted to ask, but the words died on his lips. "I should go," he said quietly, setting something on the small coffee table. A folded letter, slightly damp from the rain. "This was for your mother. I wrote it years ago but never sent it. She looked at the letter, then back at him. You could have mailed it. I needed to bring it myself, he said. It was time. He turned toward the door. But before he could step out, he paused, taking one last look at her. The woman he had once promised forever to. Then, with a small, almost hesitant motion, he slipped something else from his pocket. A small, handcrafted wooden toy car. The kind he used to carve on sleepless nights long ago. He placed it gently beside the letter. For the boy, he said softly. And then, without waiting for her response, Ethan walked out into the storm. Clara stood frozen, the door half open, watching the taillights of his Bentley vanish into the rain. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the toy car. It was old, worn, but unmistakable, his craftsmanship, his style. On the bottom, faintly etched, were the words "for my son." Her heart pounded. Her knees weakened. For the first time in 5 years, tears spilled freely down her cheeks. He knew, and still, he came. Her silence broke. Not with words, but with the sound of quiet sobbing echoing through the empty house, mingling with the rain that refused to stop. Against the windows long after Ethan's car disappeared from sight. A relentless percussion that seemed to echo the rhythm of Clara's trembling heart. She stood there for minutes that felt like hours, her fingers tracing the tiny wooden car, as though it might speak to her if she held it long enough. She turned it over again, her thumb brushing across the faint engraving "for my son." The carving was unmistakable. Ethan had made dozens of these once, back when money was scarce and love was the only wealth they had. Each toy had a flaw, a crooked wheel, an uneven line, that made it perfect in its own way. He used to laugh and say, "Perfection's overrated, Clara. I'd rather build something real." Now, years later, the words stabbed at her. Real. That's what she thought they had been once. Real, unshakable. Until ambition swallowed him whole. Clara sank onto the couch. The letter still lying untouched on the table. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry anymore. The years had hardened her, she'd learned that tears never changed the past. Still, the sight of that toy, the sound of his voice after 5 long years. It had cracked something inside her she thought was unbreakable. From the hallway, small footsteps approached. "Mum." A sleepy voice broke through the quiet. She quickly wiped her eyes and turned. A boy stood in the doorway, clutching a stuffed bear, his hair messy, his eyes half open. 6 years old, with Ethan's dark eyes and her quiet smile. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "Did I wake you?" He shook his head, rubbing his eyes. Who was at the door? Clara hesitated, glancing toward the rain-soaked window. Just someone from the past. The boy's gaze fell on the toy car on the table. "That's new. Is it for me?" Her throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered. "It's for you." He patted closer, picking it up carefully, examining it with a child's fascination. "It looks old," he said. "But it's cool. Take care of it," she said quietly. "It's special." He smiled and hugged it close before heading back to his room. As he disappeared down the hall, Clara's composure wavered again. She knew what the gesture meant. Ethan had seen the photo, seen the resemblance. He knew exactly whose child that was. She exhaled shakily, whispering to herself. Why now, Ethan? Why after all these years? The letter still lay there, tempting her. She stared at it for a long moment before finally reaching out and breaking the seal. The paper inside was slightly wrinkled, the ink smudged from moisture, but his handwriting was unmistakable. Strong, deliberate, and familiar in a way that made her chest ache. "Dear Mrs. Parker," it began. "I never had the courage to write this while she was alive. You always told me love wasn't measured in success, but in how much of yourself you're willing to lose for another person. You were right. I lost her because I was too proud to bend. I thought I was building a future for us, but I was only building walls." Her vision blurred as she read. "If this letter ever reaches you, tell Clara I'm sorry. Not for the fights, not for the words we said, but for the moments I wasn't there when she needed me most. I hope she finds someone who gives her what I couldn't. Peace." Her hands trembled. The letter ended simply. "With regret and gratitude, Ethan." The Clara closed her eyes, pressing the paper to her chest. For years she had buried every memory of him beneath work, motherhood, and the quiet ache of survival. But now, all at once, they flooded back. The laughter, the late night whispers, the night he left without looking back. Outside, thunder rumbled. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. His reflection stared back at him. A man who had everything. Except the one thing that had ever truly mattered. He set the glass down untouched. His hands shook slightly, betraying the calm mask he wore in boardrooms and interviews. That visit had broken something open inside him. Seeing Clara again, seeing the boy. It was like standing before a life he'd abandoned and realizing it had gone on without him. He'd known the truth the moment he saw the photo. The boy's eyes were his. That same deep brown, the same flicker of curiosity and calm. But he hadn't asked. He didn't need to. The truth was enough. And it hurt more than he could bear. He sank into the leather chair, the silence pressing around him. On the desk nearby sat an unopened envelope with Clara's name written on it. His second letter. The one he hadn't dared give her. In it were words he couldn't say aloud, and a question he was terrified to ask. Can I meet him? He leaned back, running a hand over his face. He didn't know if he deserved that chance. After all, he'd left. He'd chosen success over love, pride over family. But that little boy. The thought of him stirred something inside Ethan he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Clara found herself outside the bakery she now worked at. A small corner shop with warm lights and the smell of bread that reminded her of better days. She'd built a quiet life there, working hard. Raising her son, never expecting anything more. But now her thoughts were scattered, haunted by the look in Ethan's eyes the night before. She thought of his words, his gesture. That small toy car. And deep down, though she didn't want to admit it, a part of her wondered. If people really could change. That evening, as she closed up the shop, she found a note slipped under the door. No name, no address, just one line written in the handwriting she knew too well. Meet me at the old pier tomorrow at 6. Please, her heart skipped. 5 years ago. That pier had been their place. A quiet escape from the noise of the world, where they'd dreamed of building a life together. She stood frozen in the doorway, the note trembling in her hands. A storm was brewing again, heavy clouds gathering over the horizon. And deep inside, something told her that whatever waited at that pier would change everything. The next evening, the sky hung heavy with clouds, the air thick with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Clara stood by the window of her small house, staring out at the darkening horizon. The pier wasn't far. Just a 15-minute walk. But every step she imagined taking toward it felt like stepping back into a life she'd sworn she'd left behind. Her hands shook slightly as she folded the note once more and slipped it into her coat pocket. Her son was in the next room, humming softly as he played with the toy car Ethan had left behind. She watched him for a moment, her heart tightening at the sight. "Mom, are we having dinner soon?" he asked without looking up. "In a bit, sweetheart," she said gently. "I just need to go out for a little while. Mrs. Carter from next door will stay with you, okay?" He looked up, confused. "Where are you going?" Clara hesitated. "Just, somewhere I need to be." She kissed his forehead, forcing a smile, and stepped out into the evening air. The wind carried the faint smell of sea salt as she made her way down the familiar path. Each step echoed with memories. The first time Ethan had taken her to the pier, the way the sunset had painted his face in gold, the promises whispered beneath the gulls' cries. When she reached the edge of the boardwalk, she stopped. There he was. Ethan stood near the railing, his coat billowing slightly in the wind, eyes fixed on the restless water below. The fading sunlight reflected off the surface, bathing him in soft amber hues that made him look almost like the man she once knew. The dreamer, not the mogul. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I would," she replied, keeping her distance. "But here I am." He nodded, glancing toward the horizon. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again." "After last night?" Clara crossed her arms. "You made that choice for me, Ethan, 5 years ago. What's this about?" He drew a slow breath, the wind tugging at his hair. "I wanted to say more yesterday, but I didn't have the right to. Not then." Her jaw tightened. "And now you think you do?" He looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, she saw the pain behind his calm. "I saw the photo," he said simply. Her heart stopped. "You don't need to say it," he continued. "I know." She turned away, staring out at the sea. "Then why are you here, Ethan? To claim something that isn't yours anymore?" He shook his head. "I'm not here to claim anything. I'm here to take responsibility for what I abandoned." The words struck her harder than she expected. For a moment, neither spoke. The waves crashed below, wild and rhythmic, carrying away everything unsaid between them. Ethan took a small step closer. I've thought about you every day, Clara. About what I did. I built an empire. But it cost me everything that mattered. I didn't just lose you. I lost the chance to be a father. Tears welled in her eyes despite herself. You think you can just walk back into our lives after 5 years and fix everything with words? No. He said softly. I don't think I can fix it. I just want to be allowed to try. She turned to face him fully, anger flaring through her grief. You left when I was pregnant, Ethan. You walked away before I even had the chance to tell you. You were so busy proving yourself to the world, you couldn't see what you were losing. He closed his eyes, his voice breaking. I know. God, I know. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. For the first time, she saw him falter. The man who had conquered everything stood before her, stripped of all pride, all armor. I'm not asking for forgiveness. He continued, his voice barely audible over the wind. I just want to be a part of his life, however small. Even if I'm nothing more than a stranger he meets at the park sometimes. Clara's breath hitched. The sincerity in his words pierced through every wall she'd built. You don't understand what that would mean, she whispered. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't even know why I cry sometimes when he asks about his father. Ethan's eyes glistened. Then maybe it's time he did. She looked away, fighting the storm rising inside her. And what happens when he finds out who you are? When he sees the life you live? The cars, the money, the headlines. What then? You'll confuse him. He'll start asking why you weren't there. I'll tell him the truth. Ethan said. That his father was a fool. Her lips trembled. You always were. He almost smiled, a ghost of their old banter flickering between them before fading, just as quickly. The wind picked up, carrying the first drops of rain. He stepped closer, his voice low. Clara, I don't expect you to trust me. But please, let me meet him once. Just once. If after that you never want to see me again, I'll disappear. She stared at him, her eyes filled with 1,000 unspoken emotions. Anger, love, fear, hope. The rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier. She didn't move, neither did he. Finally, she whispered. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. The park across from the bakery. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, disbelief and relief colliding. You'll let me see him. One time, she said firmly. No promises after that. He nodded slowly, his expression breaking into something that almost resembled gratitude. Thank you. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her once more. Clara, he said quietly, I know I don't deserve to ask, but does he know my name? She paused, her back still to him. No, she said after a long moment. But he knows what kind of man his father used to be. And then she walked away, her figure fading into the misty rain, leaving Ethan alone on the pier. The waves crashing like echoes of everything he'd lost. And everything he still hoped to reclaim. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, surrounded by the silent trophies of his success. But all he could see was Clara's face. All he could hear was the sound of her voice saying, tomorrow. For the first time in years, he felt something close to fear, not of losing money or status, but of facing the one person who might see through him completely, his son. He closed his eyes, whispering into the stillness, please. Let me be enough this time. Filtered through amber leaves. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the playground on the far side, mixing with the rustle of wind and the rhythmic creak of the old swings. Ethan stood near a bench by the pond, his heart pounding harder than it had in any boardroom or negotiation table in his life. He wore no suit today, just a simple gray sweater, jeans, and the nervous anticipation of a man about to meet his past and future in one fragile moment. In his hand, he held a small paper bag from a toy store. Inside, another wooden car. He kept checking his watch, though he didn't need to. Every minute stretched into eternity. Then he saw them. Clara was walking down the path, her hand gently resting on the shoulder of a little boy with dark hair and bright, curious eyes. The child was holding the same wooden toy car Ethan had left behind, spinning its wheels with the kind of focus only a child could muster. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was like looking into a mirror. His own eyes, his own quiet seriousness, softened by Clara's gentle warmth. Clara stopped a few steps away. Ethan, she said softly. He nodded, his voice barely steady. Clara, and this must be him. The boy looked up, cautious but polite. Hey, he said. Hey there, Ethan replied, his voice cracking despite himself. You must be. He stopped, glancing at Clara. She hesitated, then said, This is Noah. Ethan crouched down, smiling gently. Hi, Noah. That's a strong name. Noah grinned shyly. Mom says it means rest and comfort. Ethan chuckled softly. That sounds about right. For a moment, silence lingered, awkward, tender, fragile. Clara nodded toward the pond. There's a bench over there. We can sit. They walked together. The faint crunch of gravel beneath their feet marking every uncertain step. Once seated, Noah immediately became absorbed in his toy car, pushing it along the bench edge. Ethan watched him, his chest tightening with every small movement. He had imagined this moment so many times, but never like this. You like cars? He asked carefully. Noah nodded. Yeah. I want to build real ones someday. Mom says I'm good at fixing things. Ethan smiled faintly. I believe her. He reached into his bag and pulled out the new toy. A polished wooden car, slightly larger than the one Noah already had. He handed it over, his hands trembling. I made this for you, he said softly. Thought you might like a matching one. Noah's eyes lit up. You made it. Ethan nodded. A long time ago, I used to carve them by hand. I guess I never stopped. Clara looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. The man she remembered had once abandoned simple joys like that for spreadsheets and board meetings. Seeing him now, humble, careful, human, confused her heart more than she wanted to admit. Noah turned the toy over in his hands, inspecting it closely. It's awesome, he said, grinning. Thanks, He trailed off, uncertain what to call him. Ethan hesitated. He looked at Clara, then back at Noah. You can just call me Ethan, he said. Okay, Noah said easily, already running the two cars along the bench. Ethan, wanna race? Ethan laughed, a sound that startled even him. It had been so long since laughter came naturally. I'd love to, he said, taking the smaller car. But I warn you, I'm pretty fast. Noah giggled. We'll see about that. Clara sat quietly, watching them. The sight stirred something deep within her. A warmth she had forgotten, a version of Ethan she thought had died with their marriage. The way he knelt beside their son, laughing without restraint, eyes alive with light. It was a glimpse of the man she had once fallen in love with. When the race ended, Noah declared himself the winner, raising both cars triumphantly. Ethan bowed dramatically, a worthy champion. Noah beamed, clutching the toys. Mom, Ethan's fun. Can he come again? Clara froze, caught off guard. Her eyes met Ethan's, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. We'll see, she said softly, her tone careful. Maybe. Noah nodded contentedly and ran off to the playground. Ethan watched him go, his smile fading into something quieter, heavier. He's incredible, he said. You've done everything right, Clara. She folded her arms, not out of defensiveness, but to hold herself steady. It wasn't easy. But I managed. He turned to her, guilt and awe in his eyes. You shouldn't have had to do it alone. Yet I did. Her voice was calm but edged with truth. Ethan looked down. I know I don't deserve it, but if there's any way you can let me be in his life, even just a little. Clara sighed, watching Noah play. He's happy, Ethan, he's stable. I can't risk that. I wouldn't take that from him. Ethan said quickly. I'd only want to add to it. I could provide. She interrupted sharply. You think that's what he needs? Money? He shook his head. No, not money. Time. A father. Clara's throat tightened. And what happens when your world calls you back? When business comes first again? You'll vanish, and he'll be the one left asking why. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. Because I won't leave this time. Not him. Not you. Her eyes glistened. Don't say things you don't mean. I mean every word. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to fade. Just the two of them, sitting side by side as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and crimson. Finally, Clara whispered, You broke me once, Ethan. I can't let you do that to him. His shoulders sagged. Then let me prove I won't. She turned to face him fully, her eyes sharp yet trembling with the conflict inside her. You can't just erase 5 years with promises. I'm not trying to erase them, he said quietly. I'm trying to make the next 5 worth something. Something in his voice. Raw, desperate, real, stilled her. From the playground, Noah waved. Ethan, look. He had built a small ramp from sticks, sending one of the toy cars flying off the end. Ethan smiled, standing. That's amazing, champ. The word slipped out before he could stop it, champ. Clara felt her chest twist painfully. It was so natural, so fatherly. And somehow, she couldn't bring herself to stop it. As the evening deepened and shadows lengthened, she found herself standing there beside Ethan, watching their son play. And for the first time in 5 years, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since the night he left. Hope. The following week moved like a fragile dream, one Clara didn't quite know how to wake from. Ethan began stopping by the bakery every few days, never unannounced, never overstepping. Sometimes he'd buy a loaf of her cinnamon bread just to ask how business was. Other times, he'd simply sit by the window, reading the paper, waiting for the chance to walk Noah home from school if she'd allow it. To her surprise, the townsfolk had barely recognized him. The once famous businessman had traded polished suits for quiet anonymity. He didn't flaunt his wealth, he paid in cash, carried his own coffee, and smiled at strangers like an ordinary man. Clara noticed the change but didn't trust it, not yet. People didn't change overnight. But still, there was something different about his eyes now, something softer. When he laughed with Noah, it wasn't performative. It was pure. That Thursday afternoon, she stood behind the bakery counter as Ethan helped Noah with his homework at a nearby table. The boy's laughter filled the small space. And for a moment, everything felt disarmingly normal. Catastrophe. Ethan said, pretending to struggle with the word. That's a tough one. Think you can spell it, champ? Noah grinned. Pencil poised. CATAS. Something. You. Ethan laughed. Close enough, you'll get it next time. Clara smiled despite herself. It was almost like watching the life they could have had. Almost. But reality had a cruel way of reminding her where she stood. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, she found herself at the kitchen table, staring at a newspaper she hadn't meant to open. Colin Diestar alos as Bielzelam dollar marjar. There it was, his name, his empire, his world. The world that had taken him from her. She clenched the paper, torn between pride and pain. Had he really changed? Or was this a temporary escape from the life that still ruled him? The next day, as rain whispered against the bakery windows, Ethan walked in quietly, holding an umbrella. Morning, he said softly. Clara looked up, expression guarded. You're early. He smiled faintly. Wanted to bring you something. He held out a folder, sleek, neat, sealed with his company's emblem. What is this? She asked, suspicious. A proposal, he said. Not business, personal. She frowned but opened it. Inside was a single page. Her breath caught as she read for the Parker Bakery. Full ownership transfer of commercial lease and property rights. All payments cleared, no strings attached. She looked up sharply. Then. What is this? You told me the oven's been breaking down. The rent's been eating your savings. You've kept this place alive on your own for 5 years. You deserve some help. She slammed the folder shut. I didn't ask for your help. I know, he said calmly. That's what makes you who you are. But I'm not doing this to fix you, Clara. I'm doing it because I broke what we had. And this is the least I can do to make things right. Her voice hardened. You think you can buy redemption? He flinched but didn't retreat. I'm not trying to buy it. I'm trying to earn it. She exhaled, fighting back the emotion swelling in her chest. You can't just throw money at every mistake, Ethan. You can't rebuild trust with paperwork. He stepped closer, eyes steady. Then tell me how to rebuild it. The silence between them was deafening. Finally, she whispered. You can't, and yet, when he turned to leave, she couldn't let him go. Wet, she said softly. He stopped, turning back to her. Why now, she asked. Why after all this time? His voice trembled, low and honest. Because I saw him. And when I did, I realized what I'd lost wasn't just you. It was the part of myself that was still capable of loving something real. I don't care about the company, or the money, or the board meetings. I care about being a man my son can look at without shame. Her heart twisted. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. That night, after closing up, she sat by Noah's bed and watched him sleep. His small hand still clutched the toy car Ethan had given him. The room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of his breathing. She whispered, You look just like him, you know. In that moment, she realized something painful and undeniable. Ethan wasn't the only one who'd changed. She had too. The anger that had once fueled her had begun to fade, replaced by something heavier: exhaustion. She was tired of hating him. Tired of pretending she felt nothing. The next day, she invited Ethan to join them at the park again. He was careful. Never pushing too far, always letting Noah lead the way. They spent the afternoon feeding ducks, laughing, watching the world drift by as if it were waiting for them to catch up. At one point, Noah asked, Ethan, why don't you come over for dinner sometime? Mom makes really good pasta. Clara froze, unsure what to say. Ethan smiled softly. That sounds amazing. But only if your mom says yes. Her throat tightened. Maybe, she said quietly. We'll see. That night, the sky opened again. Rain cascading over the city in sheets of silver. Ethan stood at his penthouse window, staring at the reflection of himself in the glass. Behind him, the phone on his desk rang. Sir. His assistant's voice said, the investors are demanding your presence in Dubai next week. The deal needs to close in person. Ethan said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, he answered, postpone it. There was a pause on the other end. Postpone. Sir, that's... Postpone it. He repeated. Tell them family comes first. He hung up before the assistant could respond. For the first time in years, he felt sure of his choice. But fate, as always, wasn't done testing him. The next morning, as Clara opened the bakery, a man in a black suit stepped inside. He was polite, formal, and he carried an envelope. Mems Parker. He said. I represent Mr. Ethan Cole's legal team. I'm here to deliver this on his behalf. Clara frowned. Legal team? What is this? The man placed the envelope on the counter, nodded, and left without another word. Inside was a letter. She unfolded it, her heart pounding. Clara, if you're reading this, it means I had to leave town for a few days. Something urgent came up, something I couldn't avoid. Please believe me, this isn't me walking away again. I'll be back before the week ends, I promise. Tell Noah I'm proud of him. Always. Ethan. The Clara's eyes filled with tears as she read the last line. It was too familiar. Too much like the last goodbye he'd ever written. She sank into a chair, clutching the letter. 5 years ago, he'd left to chase success. And now, when she was finally starting to believe in him again, he was gone. Days passed. Then a week. And still, no word from Ethan. At first, Clara told herself not to care. She had survived his absence once. She could do it again. But when Noah asked, every morning and every night, when's Ethan coming back? She didn't have an answer that didn't sound like a lie. Each evening, she checked her phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything. Nothing came. The bakery felt quieter. The days grew longer. The ache returned. By the 10th day, she told herself it was over. Whatever Ethan had promised, whatever he'd said, it was just words again. Maybe the world had called him back. The boardrooms, the meetings, the empire that always needed him more than she did. And yet, something inside her refused to let go this time. Because she had seen the truth in his eyes. He had changed. Or maybe, she just needed to believe that he had. It was late one evening when she finally locked up the bakery and stepped outside. The sky was painted in deep purples and golds, the last light of sunset dissolving into night. She turned to walk home when she noticed something. An envelope taped to the door. Her heart skipped. It was the same handwriting, Ethan's. With trembling hands, she tore it open. Inside was a single folded note and a smaller piece of paper. A child's drawing, done in crayon. It was of 3 people holding hands under a bright sun, smiling. Beside the drawing was a caption written in a child's uneven scrawl, me, Mom. And Ethan. Clara's vision blurred as she unfolded the note. Clara, I know I said I'd be back in a week. I meant it. But fate had other plans. The plane to Dubai never made it to the runway. We were delayed by weather, and in that delay, I realized something that changed everything. For years I've been chasing the wrong kind of success. I've built towers for strangers while the foundation of my own life crumbled. I don't want that anymore. So I walked away. From the deal. From the company. From everything that ever stood between us. I'm coming home. Not as Ethan Cole, the businessman. But as the man who still loves you, and the father who wants to be there when our son wakes up. If you'll have me. Her hands shook. The air left her lungs in a broken gasp. At the bottom, a second note was scribbled hastily, P.S. Don't close the bakery tomorrow. There's something outside you'll want to see. The next morning, Clara didn't know what to expect. She arrived early, the town still quiet, a pale mist hugging the streets. She brewed coffee just to keep her hands from trembling. Then, through the window, she saw it. Parked across the street was a weathered white van. Not the sleek black cars he used to travel in, not a driver in sight, and from the van, Ethan stepped out, dressed simply, carrying a small wooden box in his arms. No cameras, no entourage, no pretense. Just him. Clara froze as he crossed the street. Rain beginning to drizzle again, soft and slow. He stopped in front of the bakery window, met her eyes, and smiled. Not the confident, charming grin he once wore, but a humble, uncertain smile of a man who had nothing left to hide. She opened the door slowly. You came back, she whispered. I told you I would, he said, rain dripping from his hair. And this time. I mean it. Her voice trembled. What's in the box? He looked down, then set it on the ground gently. It's for you. For both of you. She crouched, opened the lid, and gasped. Inside were dozens of small, handcrafted wooden toys, each one carved by hand, each one unique. Cars, planes, tiny animals, even a small model of the bakery itself. I sold the company, he said softly. Everything. I didn't want it anymore. I'm starting something new. A workshop. For kids who can't afford toys. I'm calling it Noah's Hands. Her breath caught. He smiled faintly. It's not an empire. It won't make millions. But it's real, and it's ours, if you'll let it be. Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to speak, but her throat closed up. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to come home. Even if it takes the rest of my life to earn it. For a long moment, she said nothing. The rain fell harder now, soaking through their clothes, but neither moved. Then, behind her, a small voice called out, Ethan. They both turned. Noah stood in the doorway, barefoot, clutching one of the toy cars from the box. You came back. He shouted, running toward him. Ethan knelt as the boy threw his arms around his neck. The moment was silent, sacred. I missed you, Noah whispered. Ethan's eyes glistened. I missed you too, champ. More than you know. Clara watched them, her heart breaking open. For 5 years, she'd built walls around herself, convinced that silence was safer than hope. But seeing them now, father and son, two halves of a story finally meeting, she realized the truth: sometimes silence isn't strength. It's fear. And fear had ruled her long enough. She stepped forward, her voice trembling as she said the words that had waited too long. You don't have to earn your way back, Ethan. Just don't leave again. He looked up, rain mingling with tears on his face. Never. Clara smiled through her tears. Then come inside, you're home. He stood, lifting Noah into his arms. Together, the three of them walked through the bakery door. The same door Ethan had once walked away from, now opening not to an ending, but a beginning. Inside, the smell of bread and cinnamon filled the air. Warmth replaced the rain. As Clara poured coffee and Noah raced around with his new toys, Ethan looked around. The laughter, the light, the simplicity. And for the first time in his life, he felt rich in the way money could never measure. He reached across the counter, gently taking Clara's hand. She didn't pull away. And for a brief, perfect moment, everything that had once been broken found its way back to whole. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, the silence between them finally broke.